Hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of Safalta Talks backed by Amar Ujala. So today we have on show a special person who, in spite of being born in a tier 3 town of Bhind in Madhya Pradesh, embarked on his miraculous journey of going to England and doing his graduation and post-graduation from the prestigious University of Edinburgh in England. He has received awards from British royalty. His brainchild institution has received international acclaim. He is forced to reckon with. Please welcome Mr. Bharat Singh Chaturvedi. Hi, Mr. Bharat. How are you?
Hi, Neeraj. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Sure. So, Mr. Bharat, before we start, can you please take us through the little bit of your background, your personal life, and your interests?
Certainly. Um, I turned 23 in January this year. I've led larger part of my life in in India, and in 2015 I got a brilliant opportunity to study economics and politics, my favorite subjects, at a university in England called University of Edinburgh. Um, I think that was a turning point in my life, which opened up a lot of opportunities, broadened my horizon, and certainly brought with itself, many options that I could, that I could always check if they suited me. So,
Right.
in terms of interest, I think over the lockdown, reading is something that I've picked up on. I mean, obviously, I was reading earlier as well, but then with the lockdown, with much more time in hand, it's easier to read as much as you want. Uh, so, I mean, in terms of background, yes, 23, finished in economics and politics about a year ago, right before the last lockdown set in. And back in India now, I have been in my hometown, as you mentioned. It's a small off-the-grid town in an Indian state of Madhya Pradesh called Bhind. Uh, Bhind happens to be a little infamous for certain ideas with I mean earlier today I was speaking with somebody who was preparing for one of the competitive exams, and they mentioned that while reading in their general knowledge book, they found a mention of Bhind as a place which is famous for its rivalries, and it was I mean, it was obviously I wasn't surprised to hear that from them. I mean, I know that that is the harsh reality of my town. So my newfound interest, I mean, a very sort of short, long answer to your short question, is to see how I can, through my exposure, uh, help the larger community in my hometown.
Thank you so much to take to your background and tell us something about your personal life. So I wanted to ask, like, how can a child studying in school like Bhopal even aspire to do a higher education from University of Edinburgh, UK, England, or maybe similar universities? And how was the journey like? And what was the initial response from people around you?
Thank you, Neeraj. I think that's a very important question for many young adults, people still in their teenage or still trying to figure out uh, their little glide onto higher education. I think first and foremost, finding a good mentor is very important. Somebody who can guide you through these questions, these puzzles that I mean, with every year, now it's higher education, then it'll be work, and then it'll be something else later. Um, so I think number one, somebody like me, how I could aspire for higher education in the UK was through my mentor, the dean of my university. Was very, I mean, he was very kind enough to guide me through the application processes. He made me realize how my potential basically, which I mean now in the hindsight, I think what he did was incredible. It was almost like planting a sapling and then watering it until it nurtures into a tree. So yes, good mentor number one. Number two, People would say at times that your board examinations are not that important, but I think it's hard work that gets you wherever you want to go. Uh, it was through my board examination results, through different exams that I sat for, through my statement of purpose, through different essays that I had to write, through an interview that I got admitted to the university. And I was also lucky enough to get a scholarship from the university. So that made the journey a little more easier for me, which otherwise at times can be a very important question. Um, so yes, good mentor, hard work, good marks in your board exams. Um, and I think once you are there, you need to understand that the platform that uh, you are on is something that only a minority get. And I thought the platform that I got was a privilege, 100%, and I wanted to utilize that platform to the fullest of its use. And I mean, everything that I managed to do, everything that I was able to do in the last 4 or 5 years during undergraduation and post graduation was a result of the idea that I'm there for a limited amount of time, was a result of the idea that um, there's a reason because of which I'm there, and also um, if I turn out to be as they say, as most of the higher education students are, if I turn out to be lazy, if I end up procrastinating my way through, then I would have, I mean, just to my mind, I wouldn't have deserved that position at all. So I think, yes, number one is access to that sort of higher education for which I mentioned two, three different points. Number two is once you are on that position, um, that sort of atonement that you are there for a reason and you need to fulfill that reason. Yes.
Right. So I see it's your dedication also that, took you to these heights where you are currently. Also, I was going through your profile and there were many interesting things I came to know about you. Few of them were like you were also part of your student union, which is a 13 million pounds turnover charitable company. And also you have been on the trustee board of the National Union of Students.
Yes.
So my question in regard to that would be, what is it in student politics that inspires you and how did experience like? And also like, what do you think is the state of student politics when we see the colleges in India as compared to that in foreign universities?
I think, thank you, Neeraj. Again, a great question. I mean, the later part of your question is something that I've been trying to answer for myself. But I mean, before coming on to that part, my input on the first idea is, um, as I mentioned, I thought I was very lucky to have got into that platform. And once I got there, there was something about representation, there was something about inclusivity, which really moved me into thinking that. I mean, also one fact that I sort of want to mention is that the University of Edinburgh Students Association is the oldest students association in the entire world. When I went there, obviously, I mean, I wouldn't say it that I noticed. I think I noticed a lack of representation in international students, where if the student union had about 52 sitting in the chair, there were only odd 4 or 5 people I met who were of a similar origin. I mean, people of color, a larger umbrella term to put the category in. Uh, so it was a lack of representation that moved me, number one, to contest for that election, and I mean that was more on the outside, more on the out front. But I mean, how I got the courage to stand for that election, or to put out my policy points, put out my ideas out in front of people, was that back in 1956, my grandfather was the president of Lucknow University Student Union. I wasn't lucky enough to see my grandfather ever. He passed away in 1990, and I was born in 1998. So it was always a childhood dream to go to university and to contest for one of these positions. So that brought in, hearing his stories brought in the internal courage that one would need to step up on the stage, speak out in front of young people, and share your policy points with them. Um, so that was the inside and the outside of it. Edinburgh University Student Association, yes, is a 13 million pound charitable company, and I was very lucky to have been elected on to sit at the chair of the trustee board, look after matters of finance, look after matters of real estate, look after matters of risk management and else. I think that exposure at that age, I think I was 17, 18 then when I was sitting at the trustee board, really opened up again a lot of different directions for me. There was a very broad outlook onto things, how I was perceiving them, and I think one thing about the UK that we can certainly learn a lot from, and one thing that we can adopt is the type of activism which is there in young people. Young people would actually step out and protest. Young people would actually want to, raise their voice against any injustice or against any gap that they perceive. And one way that I found how many people voice their opinions was through policy making. That was something that I got interested in, and that is something that, I mean, an answer to your later part of your question. I think student politics in India is largely is largely condensed by the different political parties which are active in the country and their respective student wings. I think there needs to be enough space for a more non-partisan thought. People who don't align towards either the right or the left, or who don't want to, for the sake of ease, align to any of these sides. So I think there needs to be more encouragement of non-partisan thought in student politics in India. And number two, obviously, every young student, every young adult should raise their voice against any injustice, any gap that they feel is happening around them, be it in their respective universities, be it in their respective towns. But I also feel that this needs to be consolidated into a more proper form of communication. That, to my mind, a policy is the best sort of response to it. If young people aren't happy about the accommodation that they're getting, if they aren't happy about the library which is in their university, or for example, if they aren't happy about their university's stand on a pressing issue of that time, then the student association should meet, whenever they're designated to meet and deliberate on a policy suggestion which they can then send to the policymakers. That, to my mind, is a more condensed, more structured, more organized form of voicing our opinions, and that, again, to my mind, would lead to concrete results rather than hollow suggestions at times.
Right, absolutely. So while we are talking, I can also see that you are extremely interested in public policy space, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what do you think should be the public policy response for the economic growth in this coming times? So as you also know that the social divide has also widened exponentially. What do you think can be done for that?
Uh, I think as we it's I think it's a little too early to say that we're recovering from the COVID phase, because we're right now at the central part of it. Right now, I think the policy response should be more head straight, head forward, towards ensuring that less people lose their lives to different gaps that have emerged of lately, be it shortage of oxygen, be it shortage of nursing staff at times. I mean, to be frank, the government almost had the better part of last year and a half to respond to this. Uh, I mean, once we, God willingly, I hope it's any time, it's sooner rather than later. But once we emerge from this, there is a very interesting idea that many young people like me have been, deliberating upon, have been reading about, and it's called minimum income guarantee, or part of it is called universal basic income. Uh, this has been at times tested in many Scandinavian countries. So, what the minimum income guarantee program suggests is that just by the virtue of being a citizen of a country, you are entitled to a specific income to meet your to basically meet your accommodation, to ensure that you have a shelter over your head, to ensure that you have enough food to survive. I think direct cash, putting direct cash in the hands of people is the correct answer for emerging out of sort of post-COVID economic, socio-economic recovery. Um, I mean, the reason that I'm suggesting this is because almost now 8 months ago, the government came out with a very big 20. I'm not sure if I'm correct about the number because I think it was a 20 lakh crore plan that the government came out with, and I think a wide part of NABARD scheme is involved in it. It's almost more than 200 days since that announcement. Still, people don't know um, what are the specific points about that 20 lakh crore program that the government suggested, and how will it in turn help people emerge from COVID. To my mind, an income guarantee, a minimum income guarantee, is something that would ensure that there's less of red tapeism, because that is something that our country is obviously struggling through, and I think we need to be a little more truthful. I think our leaders need to be a little more truthful to themselves, within themselves, and they need to come out with suggestions, with policies, which are, I think, one part of your question was in a non-equitable sort of society that our country is in right now, where the gap between the rich and the poor is ever widening. I think the government really needs to, number one, understand that that gap is existing and it is widening. And sort of following that understanding, the government needs to focus on ensuring that there are benefits which are not. I mean, obviously the social security schemes are there which are assisting people, but what direct cash could do to many of these families is something which a lot of social securities might fail in doing. And also, like, I think, again, a very long shot, but what Bernie Sanders suggested in the US, the idea of he suggested, this was what the Oxfam report suggested. So yes, that gap does exist. The government is failing to accept that the gap is there. And I mean, with UBI as a universal basic income, the opponents, one major argument against UBI is that it will that people will stop working if they receive the minimum income which they are entitled to. But to my mind, as we recover from a pandemic time, I don't think people will stop working. If 100% of the jobs are shutting down, then that is when people ought to stop working. I mean, that is when people will stop working. Otherwise, a minimum income which just qualifies a person for an adequate amount of shelter, good food in his table, which many people struggle with, that will ensure the basic is reaching everyone. And also, I think it needs to be mentioned as part of this conversation today is today the world is remembering Rajiv Gandhi, and I want to quote that he said once that if he's sending 1 rupee from the central administration, and it's only 15 paisa which reaches the grassroots level. I think a direct cash transfer would ensure that 100% of that amount reaches the pockets of people who need it more than the people who are in between. Yes.
Right. I totally agree with all the points you have mentioned, Mr. Bharat. So, on the similar lines, I wanted to ask, like, because of these tough times, most people are facing challenges in terms like physical, mental, and even economical. And over the last year, a lot of talk has been around mental health as well. So, what is your take on that? And what do you suggest other people in these times? And on the similar line, I'll like ask you to focus a little bit on the student side also, because of
Yes.
these tough times. Many students are distraught right now with no motivation whatsoever is left. So, what do you suggest to these students? So, how can they make the fullest of the opportunities available around them?
Yes. I think that's a very pressing issue that you've mentioned. Mental health and well-being is something that needs to be addressed. And again, as I said earlier, uh, in our country, how would you, the Hindi translation of depression or different sorts of mental health issues that a lot of people face is, I mean, very loosely. This is what one of my professors told me in my university, that in India it is uljhan and ghabrahat. That is how we try to address mental health, and I mean, not address. That is how we try to perceive what mental health issues are, and I think I would also, before sort of coming on to the central answer, I would also want to bring in the idea of gender in that, uh, where statements like "ladke hoke rote ho," "men don't cry," and things like "ladki ho kya tum ro kyun rahe ho." I think number one, we need to stop being so shallow about mental health issues. I think we need to accept mental health issues as normal challenges in our society, number one. Number two, I think mental health is something that needs to be debated on a bit in the Parliament House. I think our parliamentarians, number one, need to have enough knowledge about what mental health and well-being issues can be, and then if in turn, a policy suggestion could be made, which I think there are many things how such issues can be addressed. Imagine if every university that people went to, I mean, that students went to, the lucky ones went to, if imagine if there was a counseling service there, something that was there in my university that I personally benefited from at a large number of times was a service called Nightline. And what happened in that, Neeraj, was you could phone anyone anytime you want. I mean, one of the volunteers from Nightline would be an anonymous person, and you can share your problem with them. So what happens at sort of most of the times is that there's a lot which is going on the inside of students, and it doesn't come out. The moment it comes out, there is some sort of a relaxation, not 100% relief from that pain, but some sort of relaxation in there the moment you share it. I think people need to establish those strong contacts, be it with your family, be it with your be it with your parents, be it with your siblings, be it with your close friends. I think in the pandemic times, one thing that has happened is that uh, obviously we haven't been seeing a lot of people physically, but the communication lines, the communication strands should not be broken. If calling one of your friends from high school really helps you in you know being feeling a little free, feeling a little light, then do that. If if there are other issues which are certainly sort of uh, which are affecting you inside, which at times it's difficult for you to come out and share with your known sort of social circle, then there are, I mean, we'd be surprised to know and note, Neeraj, that there are many online facilities now, which, I mean, to which a few of my friends have made their additions, uh, who are providing anonymized feedback, anonymized communication assistance to many young students. So, I think number one is acceptance of that. I mean, at times the social structure is like that, where it's only when the condition gets a little serious that we accept a mental health issue. But to my mind, if it's accepted at an earlier stage and then dealt with in a channelized sort of stream where such issues can be voiced to people who can provide you professional help in this, be it online, be it a phone call, and trust me, we were missing out on it, but the idea of being at home, the idea of being near your parents is something very special during the pandemic time, where earlier all of us were super busy, waking up early to work out, to then getting on with our days, starting college for most of the people, parents going to work, everyone was very very busy, and then to come back, and then it was only one meal a day that people were having together. So right now, when that cohesive environment is there, where your parents are there with you, if you're comfortable sharing things with them, then trust me, at times mothers can be the best counselors, and this is something that I'm sharing out of personal experience. So, and I mean, this does one very essential thing, where this reestablishes that connection that somehow, because of our busy schedules earlier, pre-COVID times, uh, was a little lost or was broken a little bit in between. So I think re-establishing that connection with your parents, or with your friends, with your siblings, really help in emerging out of these issues. And I think it's completely normal to feel um, a little depressed at times. It's completely normal to feel a little lonely at times. Um, it's just that it shouldn't be stagnant. It shouldn't go on without being shared with somebody else. And I think that is all. I mean, that is more of a one-way answer from my end. The other side to this is, if you have a friend who's an introvert, if you have a friend who you think needs um, a little call where you just check up on him and see if they're keeping fine, if they're keeping healthy, if they're keeping well. Because one thing that has happened in this time is that we all of us have lost our loved ones. All of us have lost somebody in either in our families or in extended families, and to emerge and to deal with that sort of loss, and it can be difficult at times to even bring out those emotions because of the way everything's been functioning right now. I mean, I know people who've had to be at the cremation grounds twice a day, and just in an instant, the entire world changed for them. So, if you know somebody who's going through that, if you know someone who's facing such difficulties, such hardship in their life, then a normal call, a normal hello, a normal catch up really helps. And if it's unexpected, it's always better. I mean, this is something that I can share from personal experience.
Right. So I totally agree. It's the high time also that we should give more importance to mental health, irrespective of whatsoever. Right. So now let's talk about your brainchild sanitary.
Yeah.
So if you can just tell us about detail, what exactly is sanitary and what was your motivation behind your brainchild sanitary, and also how did you plan to start that, and what were the challenges initially you faced when you were planning to start that?
Yes. So, sanitary is something very close to my heart. This happened back in 2017. I was back home in my hometown, Bhind, which again, I would repeat, is off the grid town in a central Indian state, where obviously, whenever I was coming back from, you know, my university, there was a lot of social interaction that I was a part of, where people would come and ask questions such as, I mean, about different sorts of lifestyles in India and in the UK. And I really enjoyed those conversations where I mean, it was a time for me to reflect on my own position as well. Sort of, I was almost like a bridge, bringing in, uh, exchanging ideas from both the communities, both the sort of different places. The best ideas from here to there, the worst idea. I mean, also bringing in the best ideas and also mentioning the worst ideas as well. So how sanitary how sanitary sort of the idea of sanitary was born out of a conversation that I was having with somebody from my community, somebody from my hometown, and I mean it was a normal one evening we were chatting about different sort of social lives in India and in the UK, and somebody, I mean, one that person, I mean, this conversation then sort of deviated onto things about gender, things about health, and in turn, I mean, I thought I was being completely normal when I was talking about menstruation in front of people who were, 60, 70, in their senile ages. But obviously, I could see the look on their faces. But thanks to very strong women around me, thanks to my mother, my sister, and sort of a few other strong women around me who always encouraged this conversation in a more life-affirming way than something that the biology teacher would skip in the biology books. So in that sort of conversation, which was central about, I mean, we're talking about how menstruation is considered a taboo in India, and how sort of the larger part of the world is now opening up to the idea of having a conversation about it and thinking about it in a very normal, a very natural way. Uh, so the person goes on to saying that God is punishing women, and that's why they bleed. And I mean that particular statement was something that really hit me in my heart, Neeraj. And I thought, and then I thought again about my particular position. I thought that I have access to the resources of the world in the university where I am, and also I have a sort of a community stance here in my hometown. And if this is certainly it's problematic to not to hear one of these taboos, to hear one of these to more of a conservative thought about menstruation and not do anything about it. But again, I, being number one male, number two coming from an economics and politics background, I knew very little about biology, very little about menstruation. Also, the last time I studied biology before that conversation, or before sort of reading more about menstruation, was in 10th standard, and that was sort of the official sort of transfer of knowledge that happened, and everything that happened afterwards was only on only through self research about the topic. So I went back to my university and met a few like-minded people who, in front of whom I shared this gap with, in front of whom I shared this problem with, and these people in turn, somebody was from biomedical sciences, somebody was doing designing as their major, somebody was incredible in marketing. So I met with a bunch of incredible people there who, I mean, it was only that problem that I shared with them. It was only that problem that I shared on that table. And then it was a collective team effort, something that took almost 4 months, where we really discussed why this problem exists, and then we took examples. We saw examples from many different communities where menstruation is considered a taboo, be it places like Nepal, be it places in Latin America, be it places in Africa. And we understood that, I think we understood that this conversation needs to be imbibed in the school curriculum for this to be, natural, for this to be normal. So that's when the idea of sanitary sprouted. That's when we thought that sanitary should be a body, sanitary should be a social enterprise, which goes out to these communities, which shares, these are conversations we are having. I mean, we're not having as outsiders. These are conversations we're having as insiders in these communities. If I am from Bhind, and if the larger sort of the Bhind sanitary team are the locals of, local females from Bhind. If they are going out in these communities and then they're having these conversations and then they're in turn educating the young children, the women, and sharing that yes, it is a taboo, uh, but also uh, there is a logistical gap where, if you can't afford a sanitary napkin, then you're forced to use a piece of cloth, a rag, or different sorts of, we would say, unhygienic alternatives, which have their own health issues which they gather. So we, in Edinburgh, designed a lot of prototypes. We thought about a menstrual cup, we thought about tampons, and then the idea which struck in our heads was that in these communities, in our communities, where just a normal conversation about menstruation is considered to be, uh, there's a stigma around it, there's a taboo around it. So we thought, if in conversations there's that stigma, if in conversations there's that taboo, if we go ahead with something like a menstrual cup, which has to be inserted in the vagina, uh, that wouldn't be very culturally sensitive. So we thought that a reusable sanitary pad, which is made out of material which people use in baby diapers, so they have their own strength as well. Also, a reusable sanitary pad that Sanitree does is like a piece of garment. A garment. It's not sort of a scientific invention. It's nothing that takes nothing that takes you know the elements from the periodic table, or nothing that takes uh, a circuit or anything. It's a simple cloth pad which has its own strength, a tensile strength, to last for about 8 hours. Uh, so the prototyping of this was done in Edinburgh. We got to Bhind, my hometown. We gathered here a larger sort of team, which was of you know women who were involved in self-help groups in these communities, and very active and very enthusiastic young companions, young friends from different colleges here in Bhind. So they were a very important part of Sanitary in terms of outreach, because the idea was thought in Bhind, but then it was deliberated about, and everything that Sanitary was took a form of was all deliberated in English. But to come to a place like Bhind and then to share this in Hindi, I mean, obviously, that was the essential part, and to that, our on-ground team, our on-ground beneficiaries played a very, very important role in that. And how it happened was that we set up a little cooperative in Britain, where about 27 women, when we started, were engaged in manufacturing these pads. And a part of them were engaged in going out to these communities and selling these pads. Uh, so they are our torch bearers of this conversation. So Sanitary, which was an idea that sprouted in 2017, almost now in certainly the COVID times, the pandemic times have affected us, but this was something that in its 4 years of young existence has made a very, very significant impact. And there are a number of people who are to be thanked for this. There are a number of people who've been very supportive throughout the process. And I think Sanitary in turn has become more circular in its existence, where if, for example, when I was in the university, we've set up Sanitary as a little society, a little sort of a equivalent of a college club in Edinburgh now, where every year young students who are in their first and second years are become a part of it. They deliberate upon these issues. They identify new places where such stigma exists, and then they, through their own means, and through the magical power of the sanitary pad, they try and they try and address the stigma. So yes, sanitary as a social enterprise has been I think the conversations of our of the beneficiaries, of the people who are really impacted by that piece of garment, piece of reusable sanitary pad, their conversations, their testimony does more justice to the journey of sanitary than any or many words from my end. So, but certainly, if something that it has done, it has made all of us who have been a part of sanitary since its inception uh, much more culturally sensitive. We understand the sort of language one is supposed to use, the sort of dynamism which exists in many of these communities uh, before having any of these conversations, while having any of these conversations, and after having any of these conversations. Um, and I mean, I am very hopeful. I'm not. I mean, we're not in a lot of haste with sanitary. We're not, you know, it's like the rabbit and the turtle story. We are anything we're anything but hasty in this. Uh, we are very steady with our approach. We have recently expanded to, uh, we've partnered with a foundation in Jaipur, the place where you are from. And Sanitary has expanded there. We are in talks with a few a few social organizations from different countries. Zimbabwe being at the top of that, where sort of a young man who's just come back to his hometown has identified this problem, and he shot us an email saying that he thinks that the same stigma exists in his community, and the idea of a tangible product, the idea of a sanitary pad, and not just the conversation, is something that he thinks can help the young people uh, to realize how natural the process of menstruation is. Yes.
Like that's really a great cause you guys are working for. We are really, a big applaud for you guys and your team also. One more thing, Bharat, like one of the most important thing, like you also received the Diamond Standard Award by Prince Philip while in UK. So, what was your reaction when you got that award, and what was your family's and your loved one reactions? And on the same line, if you can, give few points to the students of current generation, especially those who are planning to pursue something like you, so that they can also get motivated.
Yes. Thank you for that bringing those memories back. So that there's an award scheme which is active in India. It's called. I mean, it's active in the entire world. It's known by different names. In India, it's called IAYP, International Award for Young People. In South Africa, I think it's called the President's Sword. In the UK and many other countries, it's called the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. Uh, I enrolled for that program while I was in school. And there are different standards to the award. When you've enrolled, you pursue the bronze standard, then you do the silver standard, and then you do the gold standard. So I was lucky enough to finish until the bronze standard while I was in India. When I was in my university, I met with a few people who were pursuing the same award, and it also happened to be the 60th anniversary of the award when Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, late Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, started that award, and it was just for that year that they started something called a diamond standard for that award, and there were certain criteria which were which we had to fulfill to qualify for that award. There were um, certain objectives that we had to achieve while pursuing that award. And I was again, I was, I think luck plays a very important role in this. and obviously hard work plays a much more important role in this. But I was, along with, um, you know, along with the sort of hard work that I put in to different spheres which I was involved in, I think I was lucky enough to be invited for that ceremony and to be awarded that medal. And parents were very happy. Parents were obviously very happy. They, I mean, number one, with Sanitree, obviously my father would have never thought that after going to the UK, I would come back to my hometown with a sanitary napkin in hand. I mean, with that and with the medal, I think I fulfilled my own personal dream of setting up a social enterprise and to address that stigma around menstruation. And also with that medal, I think I could serve a better purpose. I mean, I think the medal was a symbol of a statement that I fulfilled the purpose for which I was in the UK for. And I think if anyone, then obviously parents deserve the credit for that. And, I think to young people who are willing to imbibe on a similar journey, who are willing to pursue their dreams, I think there's one specific statement that really moves me is do big things and do them better. Um, See, what happens is at times we call it laziness, call it procrastination or whatever. There are ample amount of opportunities around us. It's just that we don't see them with our eyes open. I think it's important to find those opportunities. I think it's important to locate those opportunities and then to test yourself, like put it as a challenge to yourself that uh, whether whether you're meant to do it or not. And I mean, for a person like me, if somebody would force me into a challenge of that sort, I would try and ensure that even if I don't, even if I don't reach that platform, even if I don't achieve it, I personally want to be satisfied that I put in my 100%. And I think the most essential return, the most essential learning in that, and the most truthful learning in that is, um, being honest to yourself, being courageous enough to put in your 100%. And while you're standing up, holding on to that position, not letting go. So yeah, for the people who are in their late teenage right now, who are thinking of getting an international education, or people who are thinking of entering into student politics, there is enough opportunity around them. All that they need to do is locate that opportunity. Ask people who've already followed that path the questions that are in their mind, and you never know how, and leave it to God. I am somebody who believes in. I think I am God fearing, and I believe that there is an existence that supports us if we are very truthful in our journeys. So yes, if you're truthful, if you're honest with yourself, uh, and if you are putting in your 100%, then leave a lot of things onto God, and just don't leave that. Just don't be dishonest with yourself in between that journey. If you've set out on a goal, if you set out on a road which is less traveled by, make sure that you reach the end. Just ensure that you're not stepping back, you're not stationary in between. Make sure that you follow it through, and you never know when you would have made it. And there's also one thing that of lately I've been um, I've been really researching about is a Greek philosophy called Stoicism. Uh, Stoicism is something that really helps me. Sorry about that. Stoicism is something that really helps me answer a lot of these questions for myself, and it really helps me in understanding my own depth whenever I'm trying to imbibe on a journey like this. And it gives a lot of courage, it gives a lot of motivation, and it brings you closer to your purpose. So, yes, to all my young friends, all my friends out there, just know I mean, try to locate your purpose. And once you've located, I mean, once you know that this is your purpose in life, uh, just strive onto that journey. There's no stopping. And ever you feel that your pace is becoming a little slower, or you know, you feel a little out of out direction at times, then there are people around you who can advise you. There are people around you who can guide you through that. And again, one of a very famous quote that you are only broken at times so that light could enter you. So there's no need to be disheartened whenever you're failing. I think every failure brings a lesson with it. Uh, just be steady, just be confident in your own work, in your own hard work. Be honest with yourself, and you know, be a little God-fearing at times.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bharat, to share your inspiring stories and those words of wisdom at the end of the session. Thank you so much for coming to Safalta Talks backed by Amar Ujala. And we wish you and your team best of luck for your future endeavors. Thank you so
Thank you,
much, Mr.
Neeraj.
Bharat.
Thank you, Neeraj. Wishing you, the entire team, all the safety, keeping everyone in my prayers, and keep safe, take care. Do get vaccinated whenever you get a chance.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Bharat.
Thank
It was
you.
nice really